A McDonald's employee got fired for showing kindness to Lara Trump. But the next morning, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Kesha Daniels was always the type of woman who took pride in what she did. For her, it wasn't just about flipping burgers or taking orders. It was about doing things the right way, treating people with kindness, making sure every customer left with at least a little more warmth than they arrived with. For 5 years, she had been a familiar face at the McDonald's right off Highway 29 in Auburn, Alabama. She knew the regulars, the early morning coffee crowd, the after-school wave of teenagers, and even the late-night stragglers looking for a quick bite. Most days, they were predictable. But that Tuesday, that day was different. The lunch rush had just started to settle when the front door swung open, letting in a burst of sunlight. At first, Kesha barely looked up. Just another customer, right? But something felt different. The energy in the room shifted, just slightly. Conversations slowed. A few heads turned. It wasn't anything loud or obvious, but she could sense it. A tall, quiet young man stepped up to the counter, neatly dressed, polite, and standing alone. And then she saw it, the red MAGA hat sitting right on top of his head. She had seen plenty of them before. This was Alabama, after all. Trump supporters weren't exactly a rare sight. But something about this one felt different. Something familiar. In his face, the shape of his features, the way he carried himself. And then, it clicked. Barron Trump. Kesha didn't freeze. She didn't react. She just did what she always did. She smiled. "Welcome to McDonald's. What can I get for you today?" But as she reached for the register, something about the air in that room felt off. She kept her focus on the young man in front of her, waiting for his order. Yet she could feel it, the shift, the way the few customers inside had grown quiet. Some stealing quick glances, others outright staring. Barron, though, he didn't seem to care. His voice was low but steady. "Just a quarter-pounder with cheese and a Sprite, please." She nodded, tapping the screen. "Fries with that." A small smile. "Sure." Kesha grabbed a tray and moved to the back, loading up his order. But when she reached for the fries, she noticed. The last batch looked stale, probably sitting too long. Without a second thought, she dumped them and turned to the fryer. "Give me a sec. I'll get you a fresh one." Barron gave a polite nod, his expression unreadable. No entitlement, no impatience, just normal, like any other kid. But not everyone saw it that way. Behind her, she sensed movement. Someone stepping forward, standing a little too close. She glanced over her shoulder, and there he was, Greg Whitman, her shift manager, arms crossed, lips pressed in a tight line. But his eyes, they weren't on Barron. They were on her. "You don't need to do that," he muttered, his voice low, firm. Kesha frowned. "Do what?" "The fries." She hesitated, confused. They were old. Just giving him fresh ones. Greg's eyes flicked toward Barron, then back to her. And his expression? It wasn't just annoyed. It was cold. Just give him what's there. Kesha stiffened. She had worked here long enough to know how things ran. Cutting corners? That wasn't the McDonald's way. If food wasn't fresh, it was supposed to be replaced. That was policy. She kept her voice even. "I'd do the same for anyone else." Greg exhaled sharply, about to respond. But before he could, the fryer beeped. Kesha didn't wait. She scooped up the fresh fries, dropped them onto the tray, and she turned back toward Barron. "Here you go," she said, setting the tray down with a practiced smile. Barron nodded. Thanks. But just as he reached for his meal, Greg's voice cut through the air. Kesha! In the back. Now. And just like that, her stomach dropped. Every muscle in her body tensed. The way Greg said it, low, clipped, final, it sent a chill through her. She had been here for 5 years. 5 years of double shifts, holiday hours, covering for others when they called out. And now she was being summoned like she was some kind of problem. Forcing herself to move, she kept her steps steady. Stay calm. Stay professional. As she passed the counter, she caught a glimpse of Barron. He hadn't touched his food yet. He was watching, his eyes flicking between her and Greg, his expression unreadable. Pushing through the swinging door, she stepped into the small, cramped manager's office. The lingering smell of stale coffee hit her instantly. Greg followed close behind, shutting the door, harder than necessary. What the hell was that? He demanded. Kesha turned, brows furrowing. What was what? Greg folded his arms. I told you to give him the fries we had. You went out of your way for him. She let out a sharp breath. I went out of my way to do my job. If it were anyone else, you wouldn't care. Greg's jaw tightened. You don't get to make those calls. She stared at him. Was he serious right now? Since when is giving customers fresh food a problem? Greg didn't answer. He just looked at her, but this wasn't frustration. This was something else. Something uglier. And in that moment, she understood. This is about the hat, she said quietly. Silence. A slow, knowing kind of silence. Kesha let out a small, humorless laugh. You're kidding me. Greg shook his head. This isn't personal, Kesha. You made a scene. You knew people would talk. We don't need that kind of attention. Her stomach twisted. I took an order, Greg. I did my job. You got political. That nearly made her laugh out loud. Political? Since when was handing someone a tray of food a political statement? Greg sighed, shaking his head like she was some kind of lost cause. Look, corporate doesn't want the heat, and we can't have customers thinking we're... He stopped himself, but Kesha heard the words he didn't say, that they were supporting the wrong people. Her chest burned. So what are you saying? Greg sighed, glancing at the door. We're letting you go. Effective immediately. The words hit her like a slap. 5 years. Gone. Just like that. She opened her mouth, ready to argue, ready to fight, but the look in his eyes told her it wouldn't matter. It was already done. Clock out, Greg said, opening the door. You'll get your final paycheck in the mail. Kesha felt the air drain from her lungs. She had been fired. Over fries. But as she stepped out of that office, she realized it was bigger than that. Kesha walked out of that McDonald's feeling empty. The sun was still shining. The traffic still moving. People going about their day like nothing had changed. But for her, everything had. She climbed into her car, a 2009 Nissan Altima that had seen better days, and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel. Fired. Just like that. Her mind raced through the immediate realities. Rent was due in 2 weeks. The light bill was already past due. And worst of all, her 6-year-old son Jordan had no idea that when she picked him up from school today, his mom wouldn't have a job anymore. Her fingers hovered over her phone. Should she call her sister? No. She didn't want the "I told you so" speech about corporate jobs never being secure. Her best friend? No. She was struggling herself. She swallowed the lump in her throat. She needed a plan. Taking a deep breath, she turned the key in the ignition. She backed out of the parking lot and headed home. The drive was silent, except for the occasional buzz from her phone in the passenger seat, probably co-workers texting to ask what had happened. She didn't want to answer. By the time she pulled into her apartment complex, the full weight of reality had settled deep in her chest. Stepping inside, she dropped her purse on the kitchen counter and just stood there. No job, no income, no backup plan. Jordan's voice pulled her out of her spiral. "Mama!" She turned to see him standing in the hallway, his backpack still slung over his shoulders. "Why you home early?" She forced a smile, walking over and kneeling down in front of him. "Mama's just got a little extra time off." He grinned. "Cool. Can we go to the park later?" She nodded, ruffling his curls. "Of course, baby." He didn't know. He didn't have to. At least, not yet. That night, as Jordan slept peacefully in his bed, Kesha lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The clock read 2:47 a.m. She had already applied to a few jobs online, fast food, retail, but nothing seemed promising. Everything felt like a step backward. Reaching for her phone, she opened Facebook. Maybe she could pick up some gig work, babysitting, cleaning houses, something. But the moment she logged in, she froze. Her name was everywhere. Someone had recorded what happened at McDonald's, and it had already gone viral. She didn't know it yet, but by morning the entire country would be talking about her. Kesha woke up to over 100 missed calls and messages. Her phone vibrated non-stop on the nightstand, lighting up the darkroom. For a second, she thought she was dreaming. But as she sat up, rubbing her eyes, the reality hit her. Something big had happened overnight. With shaky hands, she grabbed her phone and, opening Facebook, her face was everywhere. The video had spread like wildfire, recorded by someone in the restaurant, posted, shared, reshared. One of the headlines made her stomach turn. McDonald's employee fired for being too nice to Barron Trump. Kesha's heart pounded as she scrolled through the comments, some filled with outrage, others defending McDonald's, and of course, the internet was never short on opinions. Jordan's footsteps padded down the hallway. "Mama!" She quickly locked her phone, turning to him with a smile. "Hey baby, you hungry?" He nodded, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Can we have pancakes?" Kesha swallowed the knot in her throat. She had to figure this out, fast. But before she could even get out of bed, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something in her gut told her to pick up. "Hello." A smooth, professional voice came through the line. "Good morning. Is this Kesha Daniels?" She hesitated. Yes. Who's this?" A brief pause. "My name is Lara Trump. I believe we need to talk." Kesha's breath caught in her throat. What was happening? And why did it feel like her life was about to change? She sat frozen at the edge of her bed, gripping the phone like it might disappear from her hands. Lara Trump. Calling her. Kesha cleared her throat, trying to keep her voice steady. Yes, I'm listening." On the other end, Lara's tone was calm but direct. "I saw what happened to you, Kesha. A lot of people did. The way you were treated, completely unacceptable." Kesha stayed silent, unsure where this was going. Lara continued. "Listen, my family has had its fair share of controversy, and I know people have strong opinions about us. But this wasn't about politics. This was about basic decency. You did your job, and you were punished for it. Kesha let out a slow breath. I appreciate that. But, she hesitated. Why are you calling me? Lara let out a small chuckle. I'll get straight to the point. We want to help. Kesha's heart skipped a beat. Help. I can't undo what happened, Lara continued, but I can make sure you land on your feet. We have connections, businesses, people, who would be lucky to have someone as hardworking as you. If you're interested, I'd like to offer you a job. Something better than McDonald's. Kesha's mind spun. A job. Just like that. She wanted to say yes. Of course she did. She had bills, a son, a life she needed to rebuild. But she also knew the optics. Taking a job from the Trumps? The backlash, the labels. She took a deep breath. Can I think about it? Lara didn't seem surprised. Of course. Take your time. But know this. You deserve better than what happened to you. If you ever want to take that step. You have my number. The call ended. Kesha stared at her phone. A part of her wanted to call back immediately, to accept the offer and move forward, but a whisper in the back of her mind lingered. What will people say? Before she could dwell on it too long, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was her pastor. Kesha, you won't believe this. People have been calling all morning. They're raising money for you. Her chest tightened. Raising money? Yes, child. Your story touched a lot of hearts. Someone even started a GoFundMe. You might not need another job right away. Kesha felt her knees weaken. Slowly, she sank onto the couch. She had options. Real ones. For the first time since losing her job, that crushing weight in her chest felt just a little lighter. But now, she had a choice to make. And no matter what, life would never be the same. Kesha sat at her kitchen table, staring at the numbers on her phone screen. The GoFundMe had already passed $75,000. Donations poured in from across the country, messages of support flooding her inbox, some from strangers, some from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Her life had changed overnight, but so had the way people saw her. To some, she was a symbol, an innocent worker unfairly fired. To others, a political pawn in a conversation she had never wanted to be part of. And now, she had a decision to make. Take the job Lara Trump had offered, stepping into a world that would bring attention, both good and bad, or use the money people had donated to start over on her own terms. She closed her eyes. For years, she had followed the rules, worked hard, stayed quiet, kept her head down, and where had it gotten her? Fired. Over fries. Not anymore. The next morning, Kesha made her decision. She called Lara Trump back, thanked her for the opportunity, but declined the job. Instead, she used the donation money to start her own business, a small catering company, something she had always dreamed of, but never had the chance to pursue. Her story kept spreading, and before long, she had more customers than she could handle. Events, weddings, parties. People wanted to support her, not because of politics, but because she was damn good at what she did. And that was the lesson. Kesha Daniels had been fired for doing the right thing. But in the end, doing the right thing gave her something better than a paycheck. It gave her freedom. Sometimes, the worst moments in life push us toward the best opportunities. Kesha could have stayed bitter, but instead, she built something of her own. What would you have done in her shoes? If you've ever faced an unfair situation, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this.